Although recent research about ADHD is now becoming a bit more mainstream, as educators, we don't always get the whole picture. And while we try to work with our neurodivergent students and get them the support they need, the school structures and traditions aren't exactly designed for our neurodivergent students or our neurodivergent teachers. So today, we are going to close the gap a bit in our understanding of adult ADHD and how we can all celebrate our differences within ourselves and, of course, each other. So get ready for all of the new programming that's coming out of Empowered Educator. Head on over to empowerededucator.com/workshops to get the professional development you have been waiting for. I know you want to be an educator and live and work with more peace and ease and calm, but you never really believed it was possible for you. Empowered Educator workshops will show you how, and here you'll get the concrete strategies you need to live the life you want. So grab your seat at the next Empowered Educator workshop by going to empowerededucator.com/workshops. Remember all the passion and vision you had when you first went into teaching? Feeling like building young minds and creating community through your work would make a lasting impact on this world? Well, those days may feel like they're behind you now because you're exhausted, stressed, and overwhelmed and frustrated, but I'm here to tell you it doesn't have to be like this. In fact, the love of teaching never really went away, but it absolutely needs transformation. Welcome to the Take Notes podcast. I'm Jen Rafferty, former music teacher, mom of two, and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, and I'm here to light the way for you. In order to create a generational change for our kids, we need to shift the paradigm away from the perpetual stress and overwhelm and into a life of joy and fulfillment. This is Education 2.0, where you become the priority, shift how you live your life, and how you show up both at work and at home. So take a sip of steamy morning coffee and grab your notebook. It's time to take notes. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Take Notes. Today's guest is someone who I'm really excited to talk with because actually I've gotten a lot of feedback and questions about this very topic. So I'm excited to bring this conversation to you. Today, I have with me Shane Thrapp, who is a certified ADHD life, relationship, and career coach. And through his business, Creating Order from Chaos, he has helped hundreds of people find their paths through the chaos of life with ADHD and find their order and purpose. He is a board member of the nationwide nonprofit Inattentive ADHD Coalition, runs the largest men's ADHD support groups on Facebook, and is a public speaker who works to be a voice in advocacy for adult ADHD awareness. Thank you so much, Shane, for being here with me today.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
This is such an important topic. And I think especially now, it seems there's an uptick all of a sudden in this awareness of being diagnosed with ADHD as an adult. And so I think that's where a lot of these questions are coming from the people that I work with. And I would just love to know, how did you even just come into this work and be here at what's seemingly a really timely place right now?
Well, I'm one of those adults who found out late in life that they had ADHD. When I was 31, my son was diagnosed with ADHD through his school system, and I, of course, wanted to learn about it. And as I was learning about it, I was seeing a lot of the similarities within my own life, right? We kind of look back and like, oh no, wow, that happened. And so as I am going through it, I was currently dating my wife at the time, and she's a special needs teacher. And I go to her, I'm like, I think I have ADHD. And she was like, oh, honey, you didn't know? And I was like, no, I didn't know. She was like, oh, I knew. And I was like, how long have you known? She's like, since I read your dating profile? It's just like, oh, no. So that's what started everything for me. I started studying ADHD, and it was like the more I started studying it, the more I started going, there's a lot of issues here because our mental health professionals and our doctors and our education system and our society isn't really designed for people with ADHD or autism or who are neurodivergent. And it always seemed like really unfair in my eyes. And then it took me going to 3 different psychiatrists to finally get a psychiatrist who would even believe me that I had ADHD. First psychiatrist said I had depression. Second, a psychiatrist said I had bipolar disorder. And the third one was like, I went in there, I literally said, I think I have ADHD. I would like to get tested for it. She wanted to know a few of the symptoms and everything like that. But then as I went through the symptoms, she said, okay, we're going to go through this. And it was really frustrating because it took 3 years to get through that because they want to try you on medications before they even go any further in there. And this kind of continued on. Like, how prevalent is this happening? And as I'm kind of going through and learning how prevalent it is, how often people with ADHD are being misdiagnosed with something else as adults, how often women are being misdiagnosed with ADHD because they present with inattentive ADHD a lot of the time, how often other kids and adults are being misdiagnosed because they have inattentive ADHD, which I have as well. It really became so obvious to me that there was just a huge gap in the information. Because when we look at the papers, right, the scientific papers, there's this huge disparity because there's so much work that's being done studying ADHD. It's one of the most studied mental health issues that are out there, over the past 20 years. And yet that information is not trickling down to doctors and teachers and parents, right? It was very frustrating. And I didn't want my kids growing up without learning about that support. So I just kept learning more and more about it. Eventually, in 2018, I actually wound up having to retire from project management jobs that I had been doing because my body just kind of shut down on me. I'd had a massive mental health breakdown in 2016, ignored it, kept trying to work through it, didn't work. And in 2018, my body was done. In 2019, I discovered my wife and I were about to have twin toddlers. And my wife was like, well, you can be a stay-at-home dad. We can live off my paycheck, and then we'll go forward. And so I became a stay-at-home dad. But I didn't feel right just being at home. And I started doing the search to try to figure out what could I do. And then I wound up talking to a friend of mine. She's a business coach. And as I was talking to her, she was like, you have this background in project management. You have this background in ADHD, and you have access to all of these resources. Go for it. And that was the journey. I wound up getting my certification in ADHD life coaching through a school system program. Then I started helping people and really getting out there and kind of just like developing my programs and understanding how to educate people. And so I started helping adults with ADHD, and I started helping parents with kids who had ADHD. And then, because they would come to me and I have ADHD. And I'm like, well, what about your kids? Do they? And they were like, yes. And I was like, let's talk about how all of that works then. And that was where everything kind of started coming together. Then I joined a men's ADHD support group and started helping the leader of that group really try to develop their system and start expanding that group out. And now we have 12,000 members. Then I joined the board of Inattentive ADHD Coalition, and the rest is history. Now it's just everywhere. And I'm working on building up a public speaking program and going from there.
And here you are. Yeah, that's quite a journey. And one of the things I want to circle back to, and thank you again for sharing all of that, because we need to hear stories like this so it normalizes the human experience, right? I mean, oftentimes we tend to shy away from sharing these vulnerable parts of ourselves, but we ignore a big part of our humanity. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And one of the things that you talked about, which is so frustrating to hear and to experience ourselves, is going to a doctor and not being believed, trying to advocate for yourself and not having the experience of really feeling heard and seen. And so a lot of what you do too, from the times that we've talked prior to this, is advocacy. And how do you advocate for yourself in those moments where you really need to speak your truth? What kind of things can you say about that? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I want to preface this by saying doctors and psychiatrists are doing their best, right? When we look at our average doctor who goes through medical school and things of that nature, if they're general practitioner or something along those lines, they're not exposed to a lot of information about ADHD and autism, things of that nature. They're essentially given the information on how to give the initial evaluation and then the referral to the other people. And when we talk about the people who do know about ADHD, pediatricians, psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, neurobiologists, people who deal with the brain and things of that nature, when we talk about those people, they're getting a pretty in-depth information, but there's a gatekeeping that kind of keeps you from going from your own personal life to them. You have to get referrals a lot of time. You have to have health insurance. You have to have the ability to pay for the testing and things of that nature. So I do want to preface that. That being said, though, when you go to talk to a doctor, and especially like a general practitioner, and you sit here and you go in there and say, man, doc, I don't have any motivation to do anything. I can't get myself to do anything. Like, I just don't want to. Everything seems boring. Well, when you say things like that, you're talking about what sounds like depression. When you go into the doctor's office and you're like, oh, man, every now and then I'm just like, I'm up there. I'm manic as hell. I'm going through all these different things and I can't stop overthinking. There's all these voices going through my head as fast as possible. When they hear that, they sit here and they kind of start looking at bipolar disorder or other things like that. So when you suspect that you have ADHD and you really want to make sure that you're being advocating for yourself, you need to go in there and say, I feel like I have ADHD. This is why, and kind of start talking about the different symptoms that you have and say, I at least want to rule out ADHD if it's not that. Then we can sit here and talk about what it may be, right? That's a good way to advocate for yourself at the same time as understanding that you may not have ADHD, because we see a lot of different mental health issues that mimic a lot of things with ADHD. We also see a lot of physical health issues that mimic a lot of things with ADHD, lead poisoning, thyroid disorders, things of that nature. When the doctors are going to test you, they're going to take blood work, urine work, and see if there's any of those environmental issues to kind of rule them out. But then they're going to give you the actual testing. And then that's really important that you're honest and you answer all of the questions and really develop what that looks like, because you may not just have ADHD, like I said earlier. It may also be that you have ADHD and autism, or ADHD and depression, or ADHD and PTSD, or any other type of comorbidity, learning disorders, things of that nature. And the doctors need to know this, because how we treat things like that, how doctors are going to need to treat that, is going to determine what kind of medications they give you, what kind of therapy that they're going to get you into, what kind of lifestyle changes you need to make in your life, right? When you have ADHD and autism, like I do, meds aren't really the solution for me. I have to make lifestyle changes to kind of bring everything into alignment. Because while my autism wants everything to be in its own place, nobody to touch me, please don't invade my personal space, don't move anything that is mine. I want to do everything at the same time every single day. I need that. My ADHD side is like, I am chaos. I must rule. And so, you have to figure those out, and that requires therapy. And so that's really important whenever you're talking about that, to make sure that you're getting everything that you may deal with properly diagnosed, so that then you can take that information, learn about it, and then communicate that to the people around you, so that you're getting the positive support and encouragement and feedback from them, and teaching them how to help you and be a part of that really strong support system that is absolutely necessary for you to have a thriving life.
Yes. And lots of places that I could go with this too. But I think the thing that sticks out to me the most is, as an adult who, and I'm thinking specifically the teachers who I know who are neurodivergent themselves, we get some training as to how to create spaces where all kids can succeed, where we can give the supports to the kids who need those extra places and services so they can thrive and do well in this academic environment. However, when it comes to the adults in schools, you have to advocate for yourself to create the environments which are best suited for you to thrive. So how do you do that and navigate those spaces where you're in a working environment where there's a lot of assumptions going on, right? When you go into a professional space, I don't think the initial assumption is that everyone in this room is neurodiverse. And I would love to be in a world where that's the case, because we could all see each other as individuals with our own needs and our own beautiful journeys in this world. But unfortunately, that's often not how these spaces are set up. So as someone who actively needs to create a space that is purposefully designed for their success, how do you go about doing that in that professional arena?
Well, in mine, I just said, screw it, and I'm going to work for myself. I'm actually a different case. I became functionally disabled in 2018. I was not able to work in a corporate space or anything along those lines, just because of a host of different health issues I have. That meant working from home, creating my own space in my office, giving myself the ability to take breaks at certain times. And so that's one thing to think about, is if you do not fit into societal standards for work, there are things that you can do within your own space at home if you have the resources and the ability and that you are able to do it, to work for yourself. People with ADHD are 300% more likely to become entrepreneurs for that very reason. However, working in the corporate world or working at jobs where you're having to kind of go into work and be in that environment, a lot of what we need to do is actually start being more open about having ADHD and what that means for you, right? I teach a lot of people just to how to communicate how their ADHD affects them. So that means learning with them how their ADHD affects them, like what kind of things that they have to deal with, what kind of sensitivities do they have, what kind of different tics do they have, what kind of different needs that they have as far as being able to function in certain environments. And then once they understand how they can do things to be successful, right? What the best way that they work, right? What time of day do they best work? What kind of work do they best do? What kind of communication style are they best at? What kind of learning style are they best with, right? Once they understand these things, they can take their accommodation needs to HR, and you talk to HR and you say, these are the things that will allow me to be successful. Right? I can thrive when I have this kind of environment. And you list out the things that you need. I need blue lights for my monitors so that I don't get the migraines that a lot of us get from computers. I can't be underneath fluorescent lighting because of sensitivity. I have to have a quiet space where I can't be overwhelmed. I don't really function well in a cubicle farm. I need a active place where I can reach out and talk to my various coworkers so that I can have the kinesthetic style of communication and team building and working within an atmosphere of people who are allowing me to use my creativity to really expand on the business that we're doing. We don't want to take accommodations in there and say, I can't do these things, right? We want to take accommodations in there where we talk about how we can thrive, how we can provide value to the company. We also do need to make sure that they understand things that will trigger us, right? Blue lights, fluorescent lighting, aggressive managers, people who have a tendency to dismiss mental health issues, types of people who do not take into consideration the diversity of the minds that are around them and how they function, right? Explaining to them, I can't be around a lot of people who are very negative and things like that because I absorb that negativity. And this isn't some woo, non-scientific stuff. We are naturally prone to absorbing the inner feelings and emotional content of those that are around us because everything about us is externally built. We don't have the inherent self-awareness. Metacognition is a big problem with ADHD. And so we have to have a lot of tools that allow us to control what we're allowing around ourselves. And that is accommodations. That's speaking up for ourselves, talking about ADHD, talking about our traumas if we're comfortable doing that, at least with HR and at least hopefully with managers and letting them know so that we have the support and things like that. And then with the coworkers, just talking about ADHD in general, right? Not making light of it, but being serious about it and talking about it and just generally having those kind of conversations if people need to know it.
Yeah. And in classroom situation, if you are a teacher who is neurodivergent yourself, what a gift you get to bring to your students, sharing some of your story with them as a fully functional person in this world, able to do a job that they're excited about and having that moment of not just sharing, but true connection is an example of what's possible and paving the way for these kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Because one of the things I love is one of the people I work with in my men's ADHD support group. His name is Jonathan. He is the most amazing person I've ever met. He has this laugh that is out of this world. And you just feel pure joy from just being around him. And he has ADHD. And he has, we have these rings. I know the people at home can't see this, but they're fidget rings. They spin around your fingers and things of that nature. They make clicky clacky noises and they're magnetic. So they keep our ability to function, are able to focus on people easier because that's kind of taking away from the different fidgets and tics that we have that are kind of distracting for the people around us. However, a number of the students noticed that he keeps spinning this gold ring that's around his finger, and they asked him about it, and he told them, this is my ADHD spinner. This allows me to fidget without really distracting y'all. And a bunch of the students started asking him questions. And as they were asking him questions, he started noticing a number of students who weren't asking questions, but were looking a little ashamed, a little fearful. And so he made it a fun conversation. And he started talking about how people needed to learn how to accept people with neurodivergence and how to talk about it and how he talked about it. And he started talking about the joys that he had in being able to be more creative than the average Joe. He started talking about the different people, the different successful people out there in the world who were known to be neurodivergent. Einstein, Richard Branson. We started talking about all these different people, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs. We started talking about these massively powerful people who excelled. And then, how did they excel? And learning how to accept who they were and enjoy being who they were, because we're built this way. We're not broken or anything. We're built this way. This is how our brains function. And we don't live in a society that gets that. And so we have to figure out how to both accept who we are, love who we are, and then figure out the tools that we need to be able to function within the society that we live in, while at the same time raising awareness for the needs that we need for people to accept who we are. And be very strong in that and be very intentional in that. We have to live very intentionally. And that's what a lot of people don't understand about ADHD.
Wow. And that reframe is so important, to take something where all the stories that we generally get of neurodivergent folks are stories of struggle and overcoming this adversity, where if you flip the script and really showcase that this is your superpower in a way that is different and beautiful and a reason to be celebrated because of the really cool things that you get to experience in this world, all of a sudden the conversation changes in a way that is really empowering, especially to kids.
Yeah, but we still need to understand the limitations, right? I always love helping people see the need for accepting who they are. But it's also important to understand, the why that they have the limitations that they have, right? The realistic ideals that we need to make sure that we're paying attention to be able to make sure that we aren't living up to an unrealistic expectation, especially by society, that's prevalent around us. It's a very big thing that we have to deal with, and really embrace the creativity and the different powers that we have to be able to do things, but at the same time, not letting people belittle us for the things that we can't do. A lot of us have learning disabilities. I can't do math to save my life. Anything above basic math and everything like that, it's like speaking different languages to me. I have to acknowledge that and be okay with that, then not really care anymore about that. I don't need anything more than that. Some people aren't able to read, and so they have to understand, such as dyslexia and things like that. It's very difficult. So we have to find tools that we use, right? Things that read out loud to us and things along those lines. So it's just kind of both understanding that we do have superpowers that we can really take advantage of, but also understanding the realistic things that we have to find the tools to be able to work around. And it's a balancing act there whenever I talk to people about it. And sometimes that's frustrating because we don't learn this stuff, right? Our school system isn't designed around teaching these things naturally. And that's really unfortunate.
Well, and to me, I feel like what a cool opportunity then, because school can be such an important place during our formative years to develop ourselves and our identities and create the foundation to who we become. We have an opportunity in educational spaces to create and design a program, a culture, systemic operations that support all students so they all thrive in these spaces. I've spoken to so many incredible people over the years, and there's this one conversation that keeps coming up over and over again is get kids into spaces where they can thrive, support them in using their strengths so they can find who they are and what they're good at, instead of sitting in the back of class thinking to yourself, I'm no good because I can't do this math problem and I should be able to, and everyone else around me can do it. Why can I do this? I must be really stupid. I'm no good. And that's the story that follows you for, until you get to therapy and you start to unpack those things. But what an opportunity that we have in big scale. Obviously, that would be great. But even in a small scale, you in your classroom have so much ability to make changes that support the needs of all of your students.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever we're looking into classrooms and things like that, and you're looking at the students who are struggling, And especially if they do already have an IEP or a 504 program that you're a part of, remember that a big part of this also needs to be educating the parents, right? A lot of parents who are involved in the IEP programs or 504 programs, those are for those in the thing the educators know, but those are the special needs programs and the special accommodations programs for children with disabilities. When you are a part of that, sometimes you're learning, but sometimes you don't have the time to be able to be as involved as you need to be. We really need to be giving the parents as much support and education on what the children are going through. Also recognizing that there's a lot of times when the parents actually may also be dealing with the similar issues, because we know ADHD, autism, these are genetic components in here where a lot of times parents also deal with this and they may not be diagnosed. They may not be aware of it. So we also need to be gently communicating about how ADHD, autism, other neurodivergences are hereditary. And then getting the parents to start recognizing that maybe they need to also get support and help and learn about the different things that they're going through and why they're having such frustrations. And as they are learning about their own issues, that is also then teaching them how to give their children support and why these behaviors aren't children just being disobedient, but dealing with executive dysfunction or emotional dysregulation or these other issues that people face. Like, behaviors are communication. They're not meant to be a child just acting out for the shits and giggles of it. It is them trying to communicate and not having the tools and the ability to do so. And so as teachers are going through this, educating the parents is just as important as anything else. But also educate your students on what that means, right? How many students sit here and see a child who has a 504 plan or an IEP and they immediately start telling them how stupid they are or how dumb they are or how other words that I don't use anymore because it's so unfair. They need to be educating their students on what it means to be neurodivergent, because as the children start to understand it and they start to become aware of it, they're also going to start noticing things that they deal with. And they will be able to sit here and be more open about how their dyslexia affects them, their other different emotional dysregulations or other mental health issues that they deal with, right? We need to be educating at a very young age about what mental health means and how it affects people, and how a lot of times it is okay to feel these ways and to live this way, and that it's okay to be different. Because as my therapist, who wound up having to yell at me at this over and over again, there is no normal when it comes to the human brain. There's no normal. There is a stereotype of a status quo that neurotypical people are able to fit in better. But that being said, everybody's brains are different. And we need to be able to start educating people. And then as we are educating the children, the parents, and the other children in the school system, they'll grow up, and as they grow up, they'll start building a society that starts to understand the need for neurodivergence being respected and not vilified or ignored.
Absolutely. And the work that I do with Empowered Educator, all of that starts with the introspective work yourself, that yes, we need to be able to educate the people around us, but that actually can't happen effectively if we're not doing the internal work ourselves. So as someone who is thinking, sitting in their car, listening to this podcast right now, I'm like, this is interesting. So, okay, where do I start? What's a good starting place to even start exploring some of these ideas?
The first thing is to find out if you have ADHD, or if you're hearing this and you're like, man, I feel like XYZ person may have to deal with this, or my husband deals with this, and this sounds a lot like my wife. When you're hearing that, the best place to start is learning about it. Learning about how ADHD affects people, and then looking at their lives and then having discussions about it, like what it means. Now, if you yourself feel like you may have ADHD or autism or something along those lines, again, you really need to learn about what it means. And here's the hard part. You have to start asking yourself questions that you really don't ask a lot of times, because again, ADHD and autism affects our prefrontal cortex, which affects our who, what, when, where, why, and how of ourselves. And you need to really kind of start asking those questions. Who am I? What do I like to do? What does this mean? How do I do these things, right? Once you start really asking yourself the who, what, the why, where, when When you start asking yourself those questions and really starting to drill down into those, you'll actually start learning the how. And that's the hard part. A lot of times you're going to need help. Hopefully friends and family can help you. Maybe you need a coach, an ADHD life coach, or an executive coach, or something along those lines to kind of help you break into those thought processes. A lot of cognitive behavioral therapists and other types of therapists kind of help you with that self-reflection and kind of understanding who you are. But if you have ADHD and autism, you're almost going to always need an external source of help and support to go through these, because it's very hard for us to answer those questions about ourselves, especially as adults. We've absorbed too much of what other people feel we are, or say we are, or tell us who we are, and things of that nature. And we don't have a good reference because imposter syndrome and rejection sensitivity is just too ingrained in a lot of us. So if you're struggling with that kind of thing, talk to your friends and family, find a life coach and see if they can kind of help guide you through those things.
Yes. And I would love to venture to say that everyone will benefit from any of those people, because I've said this before, you can't read the label from inside the wine bottle.
Yeah.
You need to have someone on the other side reflecting things back at you, because we can't be completely objective in what we think. That's just how our brain works, and we can work towards that. That's always the goal, to be an objective observer of ourselves. But by nature, it's not possible. So all of the time, right? So that is important. And what a great way to start just exploring some of these things is just learning. That's usually the answer, right? Just learn some more.
A lot of people get frustrated because they're like, well, where do I start? And I'm like, hey, look, you have to start by at least starting, right? Take small steps. Read a blog, right? AttitudeMag.com, How to ADHD on YouTube, creatingorderfromchaos.com, where you can find me. There's a lot of support groups on Facebook and different places like that where you can go into and have discussions with people to figure out more about how other people have gone through this and get inspiration from them. But the key is starting really small, right? Start super small. And then just like, I'll read one article at least once per week, all right? Then you start kind of moving into reading that article, which then turns into a rabbit hole of all the different things that you're learning as you're going. And those links will lead to other links about ADHD. And then you'll kind of start falling down into that rabbit hole, like I said, and then kind of keep going into it. And you'll start seeing the things that have affected your life. And you'll start seeing the personality types that are there. And you'll start answering some of your questions that you have in your head about who you are and what you deal with. And then you'll see how to account for imposter syndrome, how to account for rejection sensitivity, how to account for, we literally, as people with ADHD, view the world in a different way. And we perceive the world in a very interesting filters and different concepts that we think are perfectly normal. However, the people around us are like, how did you get to that point? And as you're kind of going through that, because like, again, self-awareness, that's not our thing. And I don't know if I have time for this. Can I tell a quick story?
Absolutely.
Okay. So one of my people on Facebook, he asked a question. He's like, why are we so easily able to figure out the common sense fixes for problems? And I sat here and I posted back and I said, the rest of the world doesn't understand the things that we do. So while you think what you're looking at as a common sense fix to a problem, the person you're dealing with never saw it the same way that you did. And that is how our brains work. That's why when you allow people with ADHD and autism to be in their spaces and thriving and growing and being accepted and being encouraged and being loved and being cherished, when you see people in those environments being able to find the niche that they fit into, you start to see these super geniuses start exploding out of the world and being huge agents of change and creativity and artistry and explosiveness and things like that. Look at Simone Biles, perfect example. She has ADHD and a couple of different learning disabilities. However, she was always encouraged to follow what she loved doing, which was gymnastics. And as she was able to sit here and use that to be able to grow, then she was able to find her way into being literally one of the most decorated gymnasts in the world. You know, when we start to embrace those things, now, are all of us going to be that kind of person? No, we're not meant to be those kind of people sometimes. We're meant to just enjoy life and live through it and find out the ways to be happy in the ways that we can. And that's okay, right? It's okay to be happy with who you are and just to live life having fun, doing the things that you love. That's fine. There's no other purpose that you need to find. Now, if you do, great. Pursue it, love it, enjoy it for as long as it lasts. And that's how it is when we have ADHD and autism. And for the people out there who are like, well, I don't have the time to help these children because I have to teach all these other kids. Every tool that you put in place for a neurodivergent child will also help a neurotypical child. Every single tool that you do and use and have will allow another child to be able to expand and learn and understand in their own way. And it may help more than you think, right?
Yes. Oh, 100%. So with that vein, I'd love to ask you the question I ask all of my guests. What is your dream for the future of education?
I think I touched on it earlier. Like, the more that we educate our children and parents about what neurodivergence is, about what ADHD is, what autism is, the more that we educate these people about it, the more that our younger generations are going to grow up and be more accepting of it and understanding of it and recognizing it and having conversations about it and expanding not just their own personal awareness of it, but also expanding our governmental awareness and our medical awareness and our scientific awareness, and really start to expand into really significant change in how we live in our world in a whole. And it sounds super idealistic, and I get that, everyone. I totally get that. But it's how we've gotten to the point where we are now, right? When we started talking about LGBT things back in the early 90s and 2000s, we were like, oh, it was just this whole weird thing, right? It doesn't matter that it's lasted throughout history, right? But as we started talking about it and becoming more aware of it and becoming more understanding of it and becoming more accepting of it, we start seeing our kids growing up and starting to be more accepting of it and understanding things like that. Are there outliers? Yes, that's fine. I totally understand that there's outliers. Are there people who are still bigots? Yes, there are totally people out there who are still bigots. But we have to start by educating people and getting people to understand that differences are okay, that neurodivergence is okay, that being the way that we are is how we've been designed and how our bodies are structured and how our brains are structured. Like, these are who we are, and everybody is different.
Right. And normalizing all of humanity by celebrating all humans. It's really not that hard.
You would think so.
Right? I'm just so glad that we were able to spend the time together talking about this really important topic. And I would love for you to share, how can we get in touch with you if there are folks who are interested in learning more about you and the work that you do and the different places that you provide support?
Well, you can find me at www.creatingorderfromchaos.com, the name of my business. You can find me on Facebook at Creating Order from Chaos Coaching. You can find my group on there, Men's ADHD Support Group. And you can also catch my work across all of the social media, really. I'm all over the place. I also, as I said earlier, am part of the Inattentive ADHD Coalition. And so you can find them just by Googling that.
Fantastic. And all of those links will be in the podcast notes. So thank you so much, Shane, for your time and your talents today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed the conversation.
And if you enjoyed today's episode of Take Notes, be sure to leave a fantastic review, and we will catch you next time.
Incredible, right? Together, we can revolutionize the face of education. It's all possible, and it's all here for you right now. Let's keep the conversation going at Empowered Educator Faculty Room on Facebook.